Hey everyone, I'm Mike Helber here. I'm sorry I couldn't be on site. I will be on site tomorrow, but today I had to do it remotely. So we're going to try to lead this panel through the different ways of technology, which is wonderful. Our five people on this panel, you guys, I can see you, the front sides of you guys. You look up at the sign and see me. So if you look straight ahead, it's perfect. But I understand you don't see me at that time. Carnbro, Petter, Swedish, very well known in Swedish ice hockey as one of the best analysts, and has proven himself in different places. I see you're laughing, and I don't understand why you're laughing. Isn't that true?
I'm gonna allow that. So yes.
So yes, it's true. You're one of the best in Sweden.
Yeah, top 14 maybe.
The humbleness of Swedes, obviously. Thomas, Krauskopf, Lausanne, Switzerland. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you.
Jan Morkes from Liberec. And then we have Josh Pohlkamp-Hartt, Boston Bruins. And then we've done something special today where we've invited in Dave Radke. Dave was not originally on the panel, but with all the good things he's done, we thought he needs to be up there. His paper, he's won awards. He's going to be able to tell you a little bit about that. Before we start this, I'd like each one of you to take 2 to 3 minutes, a little bit about your background, but then please tell us what you do in analytics today, where you're an analyst, and what you focus on. And again, this panel is an international panel, which is great. North America, Europe. So we've got representatives from different leagues and different countries. Petter, you're the Swede and you're first. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm an analyst and a scout for Leksands of the SHL, entering my 5th season there. Prior to that, I was with Frölunda for about 3 years. So I'm coming up on a decade in this field in Sweden. My responsibilities are, I work both with the coaching staff on a, should we say, a short time window basis, game by game, post game, some pre-game work too. And then we also, of course, look at longer time spans when appropriate. Then I also work with our GM in the front office in roster construction, overall team evaluation, scouting, recruitment, all that stuff. So in a small operation like it often is in the SHL, you do many different things in a normal work week. Yeah.
Thank you. Thomas, could you give us a little bit of your background?
Hi, my name's Thomas Krauskopf. I just finished my first year professional with Lausanne RC in the Swiss A-League. I was just with the German national team as well at the World Championships. Prior to that, I was with the Vienna Capitals organization in Austria for 4 years, doing everything from the under 16s, under 18s to the farm team to the first team. I'm the video coach in Lausanne, so I do all things video. My primary work is with the coaching staff. I also work together with our head of performance, Quirin Sönlein. In terms of analytics, we use a third-party company to provide us with detailed analysis of our game. We also work with the physical aspect of it all. He's also the strength coach. We use Kinexon for that. And I'm also trying to build up my own database of analytics. So it's great to be here surrounded by a lot of great hockey minds, great analytics minds, and trying to learn something new and take something home to help us improve a little the next season.
Great, thank you. Jan, how about your turn?
Hello, my name is Jan Morkes. I'm working for Czech Extraliga team Bílí, Tygři, Liberec. We are entering 8th season right now, and I'm saying we because I'm working with my brother David, who is also present here. Say hi. Thank you. So it's real. So that makes us like one of the largest analytics departments in Europe in hockey. I'm also working for Czech Ice Hockey Federation. So in terms of my responsibilities in Czech Ice Hockey Federation, it's all like some groundwork, providing different coaches with data from the games or tournaments, doing some scouting, doing some work with pre-scouting our team, our players who are possible for roster nomination. In terms of club work, we are doing like most of the things that my friends and colleagues talked about, like game reporting, trying to scout the opponents, scout roster creation, and basically trying to find how to be useful in the most good way. The one difference, and people, Eric and Zach were talking about it yesterday. We are also working with players. We are trying to like provide them with some kind of information and consultation about their like long-term plans and how to improve their game using analytics, using video, using like kind of a different approach that usually coaches have.
Thank you, Jan. Josh, from North America, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Josh Pohlkamp-Hartt. And so I am the Boston Bruins data scientist. I've been with the team for 5 seasons. I started in the middle of 18-19 when we went to the finals. Before that, I got a PhD. And while I was there, I worked with the Kingston Frontenacs doing some analytics for them. So I've been around hockey data for 6 total seasons. And we do most of everything that everyone else is saying. We tackle kind of game strategy things, pre-game, post-game, in-game. We also have analysis on roster decisions, so roster construction for your lineup and or trades, signings, free agency signings from Europe. So I love hearing what all the new data sources you have because I want to get all of them for ourselves. And then we do lots of other stuff like sports science, and we try and do more things that are kind of like process metrics and analysis too. So how can we be better at drafting? So there's strategy and things of that nature that maybe are a little different when you're mostly free agent or development focused leagues like in Europe. And my team is 5 people in total. Is it 5? Yeah. And we have a director who was our former video coach, myself, who's our primary data scientist and analyst. So he and I tackle most of the analysis work I was talking about. And then we have a 3-team engineering staff who provide us with a lot of infrastructure and all that data that you're talking about, trying to get into a database. They help us do all of that and make it look pretty in a website. So we don't have to do any of that hard work.
Thank you, Josh, and welcome to this conversation. Dave, we added you a little bit late to this panel. Welcome. You've been very successful, and Josh actually said that he read your paper or your thesis, so it's interesting. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I hope he didn't read my thesis because that might take him a while. But yeah, so I'm a current PhD student. I'm finishing up in 3 weeks. I've been an advisor for the Chicago Blackhawks for the last season, mostly in the front office, working with the general manager, the assistant GMs, trying to come up with ways to value players, value groups, for the primary goal of roster construction. Our team is about roughly 10. We have 3 engineers. We have 2 data scientists. We have people that work on cap related stuff. And then I'm actually, as I think Nicholas pointed out earlier today, I'm joining the team full-time after I defend my PhD in the role of senior research scientist. And so I'm starting a new research-focused open-ended group within the front office with the overall goal to research how we value players' contributions, groups' contributions, how players can best fit together, and kind of an open-ended research goal in that respect. My PhD research actually has very little to do with hockey. I mentioned earlier I played hockey in college. I was lucky enough to play in grad school as well. And so my actual area of research is called multi-agent systems and multi-agent reinforcement learning. And so it's a subfield of AI. There's been a lot of like talk about language models and stuff today, but language models are not all of AI. Multi-agent systems is essentially the study of having multiple decision makers in the same environment. And there's a lot of interesting problems that arise there. So it maybe translates well to the hockey world of trying to evaluate actions in certain contexts, but yeah, that's my academic work. And then Tim, myself, and my brother Dan, and a larger group have done some work with the NHL through the University of Waterloo that you guys are all familiar with. So
let me continue there just for a minute or two. I'm on your LinkedIn page, and you just explained group compositions, emergent behavior, game theoretical incentives in challenging environments. I'm from the United States, and I spoke English as a kid. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different scenarios in multi-agent systems, and so this is kind of a setting of AI where game theory comes out a lot. This is good practice for my defense. Tim's in the audience, but so there's purely cooperative settings where we might assume that we have a bunch of agents and we want them to essentially coordinate to reach a goal. And so we might give them an overall goal, and so there's no game theoretical incentive to do something that would impede other agents in the environment. Then there's competitive settings, which are typically studied in like board games or zero-sum games. You could have two teams zero-sum games. But my research is primarily in mixed environments, which is encompass social dilemma environments, where we're both better off if we cooperate, but if I screw you over, then I'm better off, and you it sucks for you. So these are actually make up the most common area of interactions that people have, that agents encounter, and but they're a lot harder to study, especially from like a reinforcement learning perspective. And so a lot of the breakthroughs in AI through game playing and like AlphaGo and chess playing are typically competitive environments, but these mixed environments are more challenging. And so that's my main area of study. And there's a lot of game theoretical incentives, like the incentive to actually cooperate with other agents. So that's what that word means.
I love the idea of thinking back when I played 25 years ago, that we wanted to have a good team, we wanted to have a good group, and everyone wanted to help each other. And somehow I kind of try to put that into that, what you just said, that's part of it as well. Josh, you're a data scientist. Are you a former hockey player?
Yeah, I played through high school. I was lucky enough to get to play. Marshawn's 1 year younger than me, so we were both in midget at the same time and got to play with and against him enough to know that he wasn't a very nice person then on the ice. But yeah, that's when I stopped playing and I switched to focusing on football and lacrosse as I got older.
Now, when you hear Dave talking about these different situations or the different interpretations and definitions of words, do you understand what he's saying?
A fair amount, just from reading some of the stuff that he and others have put out. I try and read when anyone puts anything even close to hockey related. I try and read all the research. So just enough to make me not know enough if I was to have a conversation, but dangerous enough to say the wrong things.
Jan, it's great to have you here. Do you understand when Dave was explaining his paper? Did you understand what he was talking about?
Well, actually, I have a degree in political science, so there are there are many game theories, but I'm not as smart as Dave. So for us it was theories, but not math in it. So basically, I understand like underlying things, and for us it's always about elections. So you win or you will lose.
Thomas, how about you? Did you understand it?
I would very much like to say yes, No.
But
but no.
okay, Petter, how'd it go for you?
I think Dave explained it extremely well, and he's going to do great defending his thesis, but I would have to lean slightly towards no, but he did really well anyways. Yeah.
I'm not trying to pick anyone out here. I just think it's very interesting that the knowledge that data scientists have, that they take it to the next level, that all of that we're talking about with analytics is still group theories, how people need to cooperate and find solutions, even when the data is driven the way it is. And it's analysis at an extremely high level. Dave, you said there are 10 people in your organization. Is that in the middle of the NHL? Is that high end, low end? Josh, you said 5 people. The Blackhawks spend twice as much money on the organization than what the Boston Bruins do.
That's directly?
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
So I'll just add to the end of that last part that all of the scenarios that I talked about, even though I didn't directly correlate with hockey, they all translate directly to the dynamics of a hockey team. So they're a lot easier to frame in that regard, I guess. I don't know, I'm new to the league, obviously. Like I'm starting full time in a few weeks. I don't know across the league how big departments are. I would say it's not necessarily how big a department is. It's who you have there. I can just speak from experience that we have a good group in Chicago, and we have a lot of buy-in from management, which is very helpful, and yeah, it's been a great experience so far, but I can't speak as to the rest of the league.
Fair enough. Josh, you said you're this is your 6th season, or you just passed your 6th season.
5th season, yeah.
Okay, where are the Bruins at in the other teams of the NHL, if we're going to compare with? Is 5 a lot of people, or is it not a lot of people? Where are you guys at?
If we're talking raw numbers, it also depends on who you include, because some people would include their AGM, who's a lawyer, so it depends on who you're including, but 10 would be the 2nd biggest, just for reference.
Okay. Toronto's the biggest.
Yeah.
Okay.
5 is middle of the pack. Most teams are now hiring 1 or 2 more. So you'll see the group. There's kind of it's sort of a bimodal distribution. Teams that don't really care that much, they might have 1 or no people, and now moving to maybe 2. And then the teams that care are kind of in the 5+ range. So I think more to David's point, the important part is how much management interest and trust there is. That's the health of it. You could have a huge organization and not really get anywhere. You could have a really small organization and get really far. Tampa Bay is a good example, where for a long time it was just one person, but they had complete trust and they made a lot of really smart decisions based on the recommendations that they were able to make there. And it was, mostly done with no bodies. Colorado is the same way. So the health of an organization is a little different from the quantitative total. I'm glad to hear Chicago has come along to have that level of trust, and it's great to have another team that's willing to invest.
Now, go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
No, I'm sitting here running through the names in my head to make sure that I didn't just throw a number out. I would say it's more like 7, but with interns, it comes up to about 10. So.
Okay.
So-
Well, what I'd like to do with this, one of the themes of this talk, I'd like to talk about how do we build an analysis team? What is the next step? Petter, you've been doing it for 10 years. Thomas, you've been in this for 5 years or 4 years. Jan, you've been in it with 8 seasons with your brother. What's the next step? Jan, where would you go to build the next step of your team? How would you want that to grow? What would you like to do with another person or even a 4th person? How would that fit?
I mean, for me, I always said that I could employ like 5 people, and they would have a lot of work to do. So for me, it's only about budget restrictions, and I think for us in Europe, one of the biggest tasks is to prioritize and to find where you can make the biggest difference. But back to your question, I think for me, being only a political scientist, for me, it will be very good and beneficial to have a data engineer on my side, and to not feel so small when I'm doing some kind of things in R and other statistical and statistical and engineering softwares like data scraping and things like that. So for me, it would be like to help me in the more data engineering side.
Petter, Leksands decides to give you the money that you want, and it gives you no boundaries. What would you start with?
I think down the road, and it's probably going to be sooner than we think, we're going to be facing something like the tracking data with the chips and the pucks, and or something along those lines, and having someone who can fairly quickly manage that data stream or try to drink from that fire hose, and do things like Dave showed with his passing model, being able to work with data of that size. Someone has that skill set would be high on my list for sure.
Now, are you talking about getting into the raw data or staying within the package data?
No, the raw data.
Okay. Thomas, you have an open budget. What would you like to add on to your team?
I personally feel, I think Peter said it well, my issue in Switzerland is there is a lack of generally available data that's unified. So I would try and find someone who can collect raw data from the league, from the second league, from the junior league, because I feel like we don't have enough of it. And then you would need someone to actually process that data. And there would be a need for a good cooperation with management and the coaching staff, because even if you're presented with tons of data, you'd need someone to tell you what they actually need and what fits to the style of play and what fits to the style of roster that you want to construct. And at the end of the day, I think the question we're all trying to solve here is what helps you win? And I have not found the answer to that question yet. I'm not sure if anyone has, but it'd be really interesting to continue that journey to find the answer to that very specific question.
Now, if we continue there, who do you speak with in the organization? Do you talk to the team's GM? Do you talk to the team's coach? Do you even talk to players? We had an analysis or an analyst group yesterday, and none of them really talked to any of the players. And I'm interested to hear how you guys react to or communicate with GMs, coaches, players.
I think the communication with the GM and the coach is easier than to communicate with the players, because players don't really care that much about the data, I feel. I mean, they want to know about their points and they want to know what they did well, but as I said yesterday, you can't overwhelm them. With the GM and the coach, there's always a good connection. There's always a good exchange. Coaches, again, limited time. You try and get the most important information across. And once you've worked with the coach for a set amount of time, you more or less get a feel for what they're trying to know, what they're trying to find out. And you learn what helps them in their daily job. With the GM, it's more of a different, I'm going to say, long-term process, because they're more focused about roster evaluation and planning and construction. So you can take a little bit more time there, and it can be a mensual exchange, it can be a weekly exchange. But in general, I have a feeling that it's always been a good stream of communication.
Thomas, how about you? Do you talk to the coach, players, or GM, or all of the above?
I talk to the coach and GM, not that much about the players. The players
Okay.
usually the video, but
Okay.
numbers are more between the coach, the GM, and our head of performance.
Jan, how does it work in Liberec? Do you talk to the coach, the GM, and the players?
Well, for us, it's simpler because our coach is also a sports director. So it's like a kind of Alex Ferguson role in our organization. So we just like wear different hats for different conversations. One time it's about like roster construction and like future of the organization and what kind of philosophy we are trying to pursue. Another time, mainly during the season, it's all about games and, you know, either game report from previous game or some kind of medium-term evaluation of the roster, of the tactics and stuff like that. And with players, for us, it's kind of, I think it's more like David's unique way of talking to players, and it's more like it's offer to them to have the option to discuss their game, and we are using. It's not only about data. I think even with coaches, we are not used to using a lot of charts and numbers. It's we transferred from like raw numbers and data statistics in like first seasons to just trying to talk in hockey language, because I think in the end coaches are not want to be like learning statistics and trying to understand like hundreds of new metrics. They just want to know like what does it imply and what you can do with it. So the same goes with players, because players, I agree with Thomas. It's like they don't care about numbers at all. But we can show them like different kinds of shot maps. I'm a big believer in like separating different categories of attacks. So we have like rush attacks. You have like cycles. You have forechecking effort, and you can like create some kind of radar chart and or radar. You can create some kind of CV of the player. What is he good at, and what are his like weaknesses, and then you can like talk with him, not with like numbers, but you know, with a shot map or preferably with video. So that's like our main goal with them. And I have to say that it's not like mandatory for players. It's mostly like the offer for them, and it suits to some types of players, and it doesn't suit to different type of players.
Petter, you've got the most experience, or one of the most experience in Sweden. Do you talk to everybody in your organization, or just certain people?
Well, I want to say I talk to everybody, but obviously I talk more to the GM. My office is in his office, or my table. Obviously talk a lot to the coach. But I talk to players, but it's very irregular, and it's always initiated by them. If we have an issue with someone's game from whatever area, it's I might be giving the information, but it's the coach who handles it. But we have curious players who like to ask questions, and sometimes it's about the game in general or certain players on other teams. So it doesn't have to be about them. But there are guys who are very curious and very hockey nerdy who wants to, want to ask about specific players or plays, or should you do this and that. Example for should you go for the empty net when they pull the goalie? Like, should you go for it or should you not? What do you think? What do the numbers say? So that sort of discussion is quite common in our building. But I talk to the players, but I don't talk to the players like we're talking about talking to the players. Not unless they initiate it, then I'm happy to talk.
Dave, you said that you work with roster construction. That obviously means that you're in a position to help make decisions. Is that something that is discussed widely? Is it something you keep to yourself? Is it in a group discussion, or do you just talk to Chicago's GM? Is it still Stan Bowman still there, this GM? Who do you talk to when you help with roster construction?
Yeah, Stan Bowman is not there. It's Kyle Davidson now.
Thank you. Yes, I should have known that.
It's okay. I don't think I will be or am the one making the exact decisions on roster construction. I am more developing models to inform management, and so are the data scientists on the team. It's more of just trying to give management as much information as they can to actually make the decisions that they want to make. So
now I understand that you don't make the decisions, that it's the GM or someone up in the organization, but you talk about people working together in certain ways. Do you talk about groups of players, or is it always individual players that you're analyzing, or is it in connection? This one with that one and that one, they fit really, really well together, or is it a one-by-one analysis?
Yeah, I think there's some discussion of who fits well together. It's obviously an area that I believe is rich for future work. Right now, it's mostly let's try and value players as well as we can, and kind of the puzzle pieces are put together, by the management team. But I've kind of spoken about it earlier. I think, at least in the class of invasion games, which hockey falls into, I think there's definitely a lot of room there to start valuing groups of players and understanding types of players that work well together and stuff. So I think that's certainly in the years to come. I think that'll be big. So,
Josh, you also mentioned that you and your organization or your colleagues help with roster construction. Do you see each individual as an individual, or do you see them as groups? How do you analyze a roster construction process?
Yeah, I think when I started, a lot of it was under the place of independence of players, and that they're kind of additive, the more you add that are good, the better. But then kind of with time and talking to the scouts, there is definitely a sense of who's going to play well where and with who. Complementary players. You can't have three Pasternaks on the ice all together because two of them would never have the puck. So that's a little bit of a problem. So you need players that can play well with each other. And we've tried to do a good job of understanding that. And for roster construction, it is a fair amount of, the things we're trying to answer are who is the best player, who provides the most flexibility to us in terms of the lineups we can create. You don't want to have a player who could really only play one place. You'd like to have someone who could play multiple different positions for you or different roles within your lineup. And then how like complementary are they to the other players that you already have? So those are the kind of things that we do. There's, you know, some of it is scientific, some of it is less scientific. I think that's you know, where your process becomes important. Traditionally, a lot of times in making these decisions, it's just a bunch of people sitting around. You know, it used to just be scouts. They'd be like, I like this guy, or I like this guy. I think he fits here. I think he fits there. And adding more rails to that process, understanding like what are you trying, what is the objective, right? You know, what's important, what's not important. How can we evaluate these players? Can we put them in some kind of order? You know, can we use data better to inform this? Can we have less biased ways of discussing this? You know, not just having every one discussion, room discussion. Can we use things like voting? You know, are there other ways to improve the system? And so that's kind of the other part of our job now, is to not just improve the way that we think about adding players, but think about the process of which we add players.
When you bring that up, and I'll ask the question to all of you, and we'll go down the line. Do any of your teams do psychological tests of players prior to signing a contract? Now, if you were to hire a CEO of a company, and I guess you could compare that with a head coach. If you were to hire an employee that would make a lot of money, you'd probably do some kind of psychological analysis. There are all different kinds of tests, Myers-Briggs, and so on and so forth. Does the Boston Bruins test the players' minds? Because at some point, you guys are going to jump in there and try to understand how they think as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the amateur draft, you can do a lot better job because you have a little more control over like the players. You can ask them for assessments because they're excited to be drafted. So teams will do that to varying levels of success. I know baseball has done a significantly better job of doing that kind of analysis with predictive power. In terms of professional players, usually you use, you know, the traditional ways, use your scouting network. You say, okay, can you talk to this guy you played with 5 years ago and tell me if this player is a good locker room fit? You know, that's the primary way. I would say that relies on scouts to have good information, and there are certainly hiccups with that process. Sometimes they have incomplete information, or that information doesn't get filtered to the right people. So those decisions based on kind of character assessments is hard. And then also a lot of it is super dependent upon where you were, right? Like if you were with a team that just happened to be bad and it looked like you guys didn't care, maybe that's more coach related. Well, now this player might be pinned as someone who doesn't care. So it's very, very difficult. And I think it's one of the areas that introduces the most bias to teams today.
Petter, does Leksand do any kind of mental tests on their players?
No, we are, like Josh said, it's a pretty old school, using your sources and using your network. Someone played with someone, and you get information that way, and it's been, I would say, surprisingly good for us in terms of what I would qualify as like a success rate in those evaluations. I would probably have guessed it would be like less accurate, but maybe we have good sources or something. But doing more testing like that and just extending it to like in soccer, where they do physical testing, you know, go through it with a doctor. If that was something that was a normal part of the process, would be extremely beneficial in many ways.
Jan, what do they do in the Czech Republic? Is that something that they would do?
Well, I agree.
Thoughts, capacity?
Yeah, I agree with Peter. It would be very helpful to have some kind of like common standards to evaluate players. For what I know is that Czech Ice Hockey Federation has a partnership with some company who is providing like assessment for players, younger players, like under 16, under 18 categories. And from what I heard, the coaches liked the assessments, and it's not used for like to bring player to national team or to deny him the spot there, but to help the coach to know the guys better, especially in under 16, under 17 categories. There are many new players, new faces. It's like the first time they are going for to play for national team. So sometimes the coaches have to know like 60 new faces. So in this case, I think it's very helpful for them to have some kind of second eyes or second evaluation of the players, just to know how to approach them. And I don't have like direct experience with it, but the coaches were satisfied with the answers that they got.
Thomas, Switzerland usually is ahead of a lot of other countries and things like this. Are you guys testing players' minds?
To the best of my knowledge, no, we are not. There is nothing going on beyond the standard Zoom call or in-person meeting, coffee, lunch, dinner, whatever you want it to be. I do think it's incredibly beneficial, though, and I'd like to go back to the COVID years, to the pandemic, where I watched a lot of webinars, and one thing that really stuck out to me was Monchi, I think he's the sporting director in Sevilla in football, and he did a masterclass in 13 episodes, and one of them was player evaluation before signing. So they have a psychologist talk to the player, they have someone fly them in to Sevilla, they have someone show them the city, the history. And I think that is so important, because if you're going to bring in a player, and especially in a league like the Swiss A-League, where the salaries are a little bit higher than the European standard, you're investing a lot of money in someone who's supposed to be of big benefit to you, someone who's supposed to help you win games and championships. You'd like to have a clear view on what their headspace is like. And another point being, as a coach, you'd like to know how a certain player will react to feedback, how he will react to criticism. Because if you don't know that and you give a player criticism, it might destroy him for the next 10, 15 games. And it might happen to be your 10, 15 most important games of the season. You don't want really anyone to be burnt out in January, February while you're fighting for a playoff spot, or let alone during the playoffs. So I would be a big fan of psychological evaluations beyond the standard Zoom. Or, and I heard a funny thing. If you ask something about a player and the first thing you hear, he's great in the locker room, it usually means he's not a very good player. So yeah, I would be a very big advocate of professional psychological evaluation of players, for sure.
Dave, what do you think about this? Is this something for your next paper?
I don't know if I am qualified to write a paper on anything like that.
All right, I got another question for you then. Data validity.
Sorry, can I ask a
Sure.
I have a question to Dave, because it connects to what Thomas said. And we have like companies who are researching media research to get a view on the personality of the player. Is this something you're looking into as well? And also on the characteristics composition of a team, do you look on that as well from this point of view, on to have a correct characteristics? I remember Thomas Tuchel, he did the MINT test to say, okay, for this position I want this kind of character, for this position I want, for a winger I want a brave one, let's say, for I want a responsible one as an inside defender in football. And sorry, the last question was also from the coaching side, do you analyze the coach's fit, let's say on the characters one? Because we had it in football teams that as a coach, you speak to a player, but it needs to have a personal fit, so the player trusts you. So it's important to have maybe different characters as coaches. Is this a thing in hockey as well?
Yeah, great questions. Josh probably has more experience working in the whole team operations than I do, but I actually got this very similar question last week. I was at another conference in the UK, and it's not something that I have looked at, this whole like psychological fit, but I know that there's plenty of work, at least in football, that looks at how players psychologically fit together and how that influences their game. I think there's definitely a lot of value there. If it's able to be done, I'm sure it's very difficult. But speaking just about Chicago for a second, I know that we have sports psychologists that travel with the team and spend a lot of time with the players. And I think just through conversations with them, I think they have their fingers on the pulse of how the team operates and what kinds of people they're dealing with. I think there's definitely value in trying to model something like that, but it's not something that I've been doing directly. So I don't know if Josh, if that's something that you've done.
No, mostly because getting the data for all the different types of players and their mentalities is relatively difficult, and then trying to correlate it back to their style of play and how they might work together is definitely a huge project. I'd love to have the data, so maybe I should hire a bunch of interns to do that. That would be a good move for them. I would say on the coaching side, for coaching fit, it's definitely important to think of the players as learners and people that have to be motivated. And so you have to have a coach or a set of coaches that can teach and motivate appropriate to each player. We had a player that we acquired this last year that we knew that the style which he learned and was motivated was very different from the way he had been previously coached. And we knew that from sources. So because of that, we were able to, when we hired our new coach, he had that information and he was able to, give that player slightly different coaching strategy and style, which worked to our benefit. That's the sort of thing you need to be able to do. Someone like Marchand, we know you could basically punch him over the head every shift and he wouldn't care because that's the way he plays. He's just like, you can motivate him however you want. So we have coaches that are really good at yelling and, that works for him. Whereas we have other coaches who might have a softer touch. I think that's a dynamic that isn't measured very well, but is one that everyone needs to be cognizant of if you're trying to make the most of your player resources.
Thanks for the questions. Is anybody else in the room? I can't see everybody's hands, but please jump in if you have questions. It works out just fine. Yesterday, we had a conversation with representatives from Sports Contract, Stathletes, Wise Hockey, Speedio. They all discussed about making more products. They want to be able to create more products. One company was strictly a tech company. Another company was, okay, we're a tech company, but we also like hockey. Another company was a hockey tech company. And the last one was, we're a hockey company. What I want to get into is the basis for your jobs is to have data. And do we trust that data with what you guys have seen over the last couple of years? Is the data the truth? Or is the data something that needs to be interpreted and can be interpreted by the five of you very, very differently with the same information? Who wants to start? Let's give that to the Swede. Petter, what do you think? Is the data valid? Do we like the data? Can we trust the data?
I mean, it depends on where data is quite broad.
The data that you use, then we'll keep it to that.
Well, I mean, that data is also quite broad. So, but I mean, of course, when you're talking about relatively basic things like a shot attempt or a pass attempt, I don't think you don't have to have trust issues with that. But when you get into more complex modeling or, I mean, if you go on Twitter, like an XG model, a public XG model will, this doesn't accurately portray the difficulty of the shot or whatever because inputs are missing to fully capture the event, but maybe the model isn't entirely, set up to capture that event. It's meant to work over very large data sets and do that job. Maybe it's not meant to be super descriptive. It's geared more towards being a predictive model. So that's maybe where you can run into that when you get into the modeling, because you have to make decisions that influence things very greatly. So yeah, I kind of lost my way, but I don't have trust issues with the data. I don't. I built my own XG model, so I know what it does and doesn't do.
You built your own model, so you've taken the raw data and built your own models and not taken a packaged product.
Yes, and we do a lot of things with how the data is, it's packaged one way, but we change some definitions more to my liking or our liking. It's not a huge shift. Maybe we take some things and package them together and call it something else, because it seemed to make sense at the time. So it might be decisions like that, which makes me maybe trust the data more because I've done the work with it myself rather than someone giving me a product and I'm not really sure what's in the special sauce, right? So that's how we've done it, and I don't have trust issues with that. No.
Josh, do you have trust issues with the data?
Oh, ours is very similar. We take raw product, we do we re-event, we reanalyze ourselves, all the models we build ourselves. So our trust issues rely on eventing, and we constantly have ongoing known quality control things. But the nice thing about those people you were talking about yesterday from the data companies, like they all are very responsive, nice people who are very helpful. And if you send them an email and say, hey, this shot is not in the right place, they will go ahead and fix the event for you. So we have
Is that easy? Is that easy to fix it? Hey, the shot was wrong. Can you fix it for me?
No, it's not. Well, it's not that easy, but it's close enough where you can get the feedback loop is fast enough. And we've learned from other sports that if you're willing to work with your vendor providers and help them improve their quality and understanding of what it is that's important to you, that you're going to get a better product and they're going to build a better product. So that's to us how we build the trust and how we feel strongly about data validity. You also have to have good engineers who do sensible data checks. You shouldn't be getting back a game where all your shots are from like the center line, like that would be wrong. So things like that you should definitely be checking for. So that's how we get it, is cautious trust, I guess is the right way.
Thomas, well, what do you think about the data validity? Do you trust it? I assume that because you're only one person, you have to accept packaged products more than be able to analyze the data as deeply as a team of 5.
I like the expression cautious trust. In Switzerland, we don't have any raw data given to us, so we only get packaged information, post-game reports, pre-game reports. So I'm a firm believer in trusting my own data alone, because when I saw it at the World Championships too, there was a large discrepancy in data. So some company had us deserve to win at 80%, while the other had us deserve to win at 55%. And that's quite a large difference. So I prefer to stick to my own data simply because I know it'll be done consistently. You'll obviously miss something every now and then, but over the course of a, say, 52 game season or 82 game season, the sample size where 1 or 2 errors are essentially void. But I trust my own data, again, even though if there's a couple mistakes, just because I know it's done consistently, and I prefer to have it done that way. Data is supposed to be objective, and then there's things like the most common discussion of them all, scoring chances. What do you define a scoring chance? What's a grade A? What's a grade B? What's a grade C? I can't tell you how many minutes and hours we've lost over that discussion alone with the goalie coach, because goalie coaches are special, goalies are special, and everyone's got their own opinion. Like Maciej said, like we have a room full of analysts. Somebody wants to say anything about the goalies, but nobody's saying anything. So that is supposed to be objective, and if you stick to your own work throughout, or your team's work throughout the season, I feel like you should not have any issues. And if you do, then might be time to change your team. But yeah, cautious trust. I'll stick to that expression. Cautious trust. I like that, Josh.
Dave, what do you say about this with data? Trust it? Cautious trust, or a different analysis?
I just before you, and I was going to say I like that term, cautious trust. Maybe I'll put my Waterloo hat on for a bit, but yeah, I think if I've learned anything in grad school, and Tim's laughing at me, it's that like you should always be skeptical of whatever you're doing. Like if you get outputs, even like it's probably pretty rare that you'll put something together and there's no bugs in it at all. And even if it works, like I've gone to many meetings just from my own research where we'll have a meeting with my other advisor and like we're going through results, and then a day later I have to send an email and I'm like, oh, just kidding, like something was wrong. But in terms of like the raw data that companies provide, like, and in terms of like the conversation yesterday, like more data versus more fine-grained data. I actually was giving a talk about a month ago, and I made the mistake of saying we have data on everything. And a professor at Waterloo raised his hand, and he very quickly reminded me that we did not have data on everything. And so I think it's important to identify the limitations of a lot of the data that we have, and also identify areas where the data could be enhanced and used. And Tim's has it's not Tim's expression, but like, you know, data or garbage in, garbage out. And I've built many garbage models where I couldn't figure it out for days. And then I realized that it was like some weird data bug that I was like transforming the data incorrectly. So, but that's beyond the raw data. Essentially, I like cautious trust as a guiding principle. So
now we've got three there. Jan, what do you say? Is it cautious trust for you too, or do you and your brother argue about the validity of the data?
Well, when I started 8 years ago, there were no data provider for Czech Republic, so I had to like create my own methodology, how to track games, how to define shots, how to define zone entries, zone exits. And so I've learned the hard way that it's like nothing is objective, and you have to like rewind. Sometimes you can rewind the situation like 5 times back and forth, and you can't decide if it was shot or not. And such situations happen in every game, and in hockey especially, when you have like such small nonsense which every like 5 guys battling for, it's very difficult to get to 100%. So nowadays it's getting better, but we are still tracking our own games, and you know, I spent a lot of my time to like watch the games and trying to understand the connection between numbers and like the eye test and what we see on the rink, and what are the advantages and limitations of every statistics we are collecting. So I'm still very cautious, and I think when I was thinking about it 8 years ago, the problem was that we had no data, no advanced stats, and we need to create some statistics and metrics to get us better information. Today, I think my goal as an analyst is to trying to leave some numbers from coaches and players and to filter informations and metrics which we agreed upon. Because you can have so many new numbers and they are very nice and shiny and coaches love them, but you know, like from statistical perspective, there is no background research to make them viable to use in the organization. And I'm pushing very hard not to show them to the coaches, not or when they are looking at them, I try to comment on it and like to give them like all the asterisks to every metrics that is not like very reliable, verifiable, or something like that. For example, just to give you an example, Wise Hockey were giving us a lot of great numbers and their dashboard and connection video and data during the game, during live games is great. But I don't have numbers for like a whole tournament, and so for me, like to use the data and to give them to the coaches is something I'm very hesitant to do, because it's, for me, it's not. I don't know what is how it's defined. I'm not familiar with data, what it can do, what it can cover, what it doesn't cover. So this is the situation. I think this is the situation right now for me and data.
Thank you. Well, we're getting close to the end. The one other question I talked to the people from the industry, and I asked them was, well, what's the big thing that's coming up? And it's nothing new. It's tracking. It's World Championships. Thomas, you were there. The NHL has puck tracking as well, I believe. The Swedish League does not have puck tracking. Could you all just say something about, is tracking the next new thing? And it's not new to that sense because we've had it before, but it's expanding throughout the world. Is that the next thing? And if it's not, what else is the next thing? What are we going to be looking at and watching? Thomas, I'll start with you. You're at the World Championships. There was puck tracking there. What do you think? What's the next thing?
I think tracking's already a great advancement in terms of analytics. We were presented with a lot of different metrics, and I think the ones we looked at the most was player contested wins, it was called. So more or less won battles, 50-50 pucks, loose puck rebounds, whatever you want to call them. Everything else, the passing data, it's not really something you can do a lot with after a game or after 2 or 3 games. What the next big thing is, I honestly do not know. Companies are companies for a reason. They need to bring out new products to stay alive, to make money. I'm very stubborn in the mindset of still trying to find what actually helps us win. So I'm not really looking forward that much to what's coming next. I'd really like to refine what we have now and use it to the best of our possibilities and how to help us win games and win championships. It might be a stubborn mindset, but I feel like at some point it can get too much, and too much data is not good because you're not really going to be sure what to do with it. So I'd rather stick in my process of trying to find what works for us, trying to find what helps us win games and championships, and go from there.
Thanks. Petter, is tracking the big thing?
Yes, I mean, it's the big thing, but I also think we're facing like the even just in Europe where not like event data is getting younger. We're getting it for J20 leagues, youth players, women's leagues too. So I think it's broadening a lot in that perspective, and that's maybe what's most on my mind, seeing as we have a J20 team and a women's team in our organization too. So I think that's what I'm thinking about. But of course, the big thing is the tracking data, which is coming sometime. Not sure when, but it's going to be a big one for sure.
Jan, what do you think? Is tracking the big thing for you as well, or is something else?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something which excites me the most. I think the sports are, especially our sports like hockey, football, basketball, are about geometry. And when you have like information about all the players on the ice, it's like you are getting somewhere else. And I think it's also like better for coaches and players to show them something like where everybody stands on the ice, and something like that is very helpful and can be very helpful. But for me, like from dreamland to groundwork, I think for us and for me, the personal goal is to help our organization, to use the current data well in the different categories. I'm in contact with our head of academy, who's like under 20, under 18 and stuff like that. And I think it's not about getting more data into the organization. That's like for us analysts, I think, to play with, but to change the minds of the organization and to like use them properly and use the information properly and have some kind of processes how to deal with data and how to make the best decision for our organization. Because in the end, the data are like one of the layers of information you are using, and you need to connect them with other sources of information, and you need to make the best decision for you and to have like some kind of institutional memory, what you did, how it went, and what you want to do from now on further on.
Thank you. Dave, tracking, it's in the NHL, so you guys have obviously used some of it. What's the next new thing, or is tracking adding on, expanding? Is that the place to be?
Yeah, obviously tracking's here in the NHL now, and it's expanding. The system isn't perfect, but it's expanding. There's hopefully going to be stick tracking soon, and then pose estimation, stuff like that. At the end of the day, like, tracking gives more information about the state of the game, to help model decisions that are made by players. But I wouldn't just throw everything else out because we have tracking data at the NHL. A lot of the models that we need to build are not just about analyzing the NHL. We need to analyze the American League. We need to analyze juniors. We need to analyze the SHL. And there's a lot to still be done with event data that you know, it hasn't fully matured. And so tracking data will be nice. Hopefully it ends up across all the leagues. But at the end of the day, I think we can learn a lot from other fields, not just other sports that build analytics models. I think just other fields in general, we can learn a lot about how to model decisions and how to model different states of the game. And I think we can do that with event data. Tracking data will just enrich the state space of how we make those models. So.
Josh, can you take us home? What do you think? Is this tracking the big thing that we're going to be using, focusing on, or is there something else coming?
I think it's the most exciting thing. I think everything everyone else has said is perfectly correct, and I agree with all of it. It's the most exciting. I don't think it'll be the most transformative part of where analytics goes. I think where we have tracking data is where we're the most focused currently. We have coaches who spend all their time looking at video, which is going to be better than tracking data. So they already understand systems. We can find some patterns they may not find, but tracking data is not going to give us, you know, some holy grail that we're missing. It's just going to help us be better. I think it's totally correct that player development is a huge avenue. You've already got these players in your system, so like maximize their value. It saves you from having to go and sign a bunch of new players. So they're cheaper, and you can optimize something you already have in the system. So more data at lower levels, higher quality data, and improving the feedback systems to them. So working with their coaches or your development coaches so that they understand the same things that you have at the pro level, the feedback loops that you give for data now at the pro level, you should be able to give at all levels. And then I think, to David's point, the most transformative part is probably how we work with decisions. How do we design processes and decisions across our organizations? I think you heard yesterday, the data companies were talking about, are they a tech company or are they a hockey company? I think analytics departments become a tech company. That's my belief. Your job is to provide systems and analysis, and it's more or less independent of the domain, the way you do it. So I think that's what's going to happen. And it's more how can you make the best decisions as an organization and provide the information to that. So that's, I think, the most transformative part.
Thanks, Josh. We're over time. We're over time now by a few minutes. Is there somebody that had any questions in the room?
Yeah, I have a question. I really liked what Josh said, and also because I have the feeling in football it was the same road. We had tracking data, but how many people can make use of the raw tracking data and combine it with event data? Do we have actually the persona? Do we have the persona who are the experts also of the sport? Because that's what you need. So maybe a question to the people here, to the coaches we have. And then my second question also is on individual development plans, if it's a big thing in hockey, as in football it truly is. And I have coaches who raise more an integrative approach. So they ask the players to come with scenes, they sit together, they exchange every week, they exchange a playlist with the players on their playbook or every week, and they collect this based on a mental, physical, and technical point. So is this a thing on working really with an individual, a big thing, or you don't have the time because you have every 3 days a game or even more? And so when do you actively work with the players? Does the coaching stuff need to increase? Does the data need to increase to more automate stuff? So yeah, for the group, how do you see these items, let's say?
Who wants to take that one?
So Mike, can I rephrase the question a little bit?
Sure, certainly.
So I think Thomas have hinted at sort of, okay, you all want to win. And we have one person here that really know how to win, and that's Josh. So, I mean, with President's Trophy and winning more NHL games than any team have been before, I think Boston sort of records speak for themselves. So if we connect with his question, one thing that I'm really interested in from all of these aspects that you discussed, including the previous question, which of those aspects were the most important to help Boston have the record that you have last year? And how can the teams here sort of learn from what you've done in Boston to translate that to the Swedish league and other leagues?
Well, I think partially we got very lucky that we hired a coach who really fit well with what we needed. His style of coaching aligned very well with the tactical decisions that we thought the team should make from an analytics perspective. One thing that we as a team have praised is shot quality. Like, don't take stupid shots. I think that anyone who builds an expected goals model knows that if you just shoot a puck from the blue line without moving at all, that's not a very smart decision. You're basically the free turnover to the other team. So getting a coach who aligned well with the analytics ideas we had and was willing to talk about data and was willing to use that feedback to the players, that was what helped us somewhat this season. But we were very lucky too. We won a lot of games that were close or maybe could have gone the other way. So and it didn't work in our way in the playoffs. So I think luck is a certain factor to that. So I think the things you can take are try and have some systematic credo, like some idea what you're going to do as a team. What is your strategy? What is the things that, the handful of stats, what are the handful of strategy points that are most important? Is it defending the slot and having high quality shots? If that's all you care about, then have those stats available to your coach. Don't worry about 35 other things because you're going to confuse them. And have your coach and your players understand that and have all your systems built around those things. We've had several coaches in a row that are very defensively minded, and that is so we have a lot of defensive metrics that they think are important, as an organization. So it's kind of like, how can you turn the data into lining up with the strategy and then providing feedback that's the most actionable.
So don't do too much, do something really well and have everyone understand what you're all trying to do.
Yeah, and the players you acquire should match that too. If you have a team that is defensively responsible, you don't have an interest or aptitude to take on players who are extremely defensively lax, I guess I would say, uninterested. So a player like Patrick Kane, who we knew did not like to defend very much. You know, when he became available, he's not a player that would fit very well in our top six because we only have so many Patrice Bergerons and he can only, you know, cover so much of the ice. So, you know, you don't really want to have another less defensive player. Whereas we are more willing and more interested to take on players like Tomáš Nosek because he's a very defensively responsible player. So when we make our decisions, that's a lot of how we do. And I would say, like David, in Chicago, like you have Athanasiou that you just signed, and he aligns well with the strategy of being a very offensive-centric player, right? Like he has worked well in that role, and he will work in that role in that top six. And you just re-signed him, right? So it kind of aligns with team strategy.
Thank you, Josh. Any other questions? Or 10 minutes past the time that we were to have. We started a little bit late, but gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for all your information and helping us understand. I say again that you guys are on the cutting edge and you're creating a totally new hockey for the future, a hockey that a lot of us older people have to understand that this is where the future is, and data analysis is going to influence the world of hockey and many other things. Thank you for being here.